now because it's 3 p.m. It's our official start time. And as we're revving up here, I'm just gonna actually I'll as we start here, I'm gonna introduce the talk and who are the facilitators. Ren, would you be willing to just mute everybody except for me for a moment?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and I want to honor your call to feel like joining, because this is a topic that is not your normal topic in the news feed of media. And so it really takes a kind of a spirit and a soul that feels called to step into work of, healing one's own psyche, healing one's own kind of internal being, which is, big part of healing the external world. And so I want to honor everybody who's here with us today by recognizing that fact and introduce the talk. The talk is going to be about the healing potential of, the title is actually The Healing Potential of Altered States. And we're going to focus on one modality of healing in particular known as holotropic breathwork. It's interesting because the talk itself is based on the work of a psychologist named Stan Grof and others, but he was one of the pioneers of discovering the healing potential from altered states. He actually liked to use the word non-ordinary states. He preferred non-ordinary states. I use altered states in the title because a lot of people who aren't exposed to this don't know what non-ordinary states mean. But he preferred non-ordinary states because if we say altered states, it means there's a connotation there as if it's almost like we have a regular way of being and then a way that is altered. It's not quite correct somehow. When in actuality, he feels that when we access our subconscious through these modalities of healing that we're going to talk about today, it's actually quite natural. It's a quite natural part of us that comes forth. And it's kind of a more expanded sense of who we are and what humans are capable of experiencing and becoming conscious of. But it is a part of us, and not only can we have kind of experiences that are considered, very different from our ordinary everyday reality, but also we can have experiences, we can get in touch with a healing intelligence that's actually ours. It's actually inside our own psyche, just like the body has a healing intelligence. When we get cut, the cut heals, and we don't necessarily have to do anything to make the cut heal. We just have to kind of support the process and not undo the process. So I'm gonna start the talk today by introducing my team here that I have with me. My team of very exceptionally experienced workshop facilitators and experience in this realm of dealing, healing through non-ordinary states. So I'm going to introduce my team, and then we're going to have a discussion about what is this work, what does it entail, what's the history, what are some examples of the types of experiences that people can have, what is some examples of the types of depth of healing that people can have. And at the same time, we are going to you can feel free to ask questions. There's a little chat box. You can ask questions throughout. Towards the end, we're gonna open it up to a full-on discussion. We'd love to actually get to know you better, everybody that's on the call, so that we can make a personal connection with you. And so with that, why don't I introduce my team here. Ren, would you be willing to unmute Amber and Laurel and Lada yourself?
Okay.
Right. So I have with me here today Ren Butler, who is he's a holotropic breathwork facilitator, and he has over 3 decades of experience offering workshops in this healing modality. He's out of Victoria, Canada. He's also a counseling archetypal astrologer who's written 2 critically acclaimed books, The Archetypal Universe and Pathways to Wholeness. Absolutely wonderful books. And he is actually kind of a community hub. He's the one who's pulled us all together here. He's brought together all of us facilitators here today. We also have with us today Laura Watchin, who is also a holotropic facilitator and a co-founder of the nonprofit Breathwork Northwest in the Northwest of the United States. And she's organized and facilitated breathwork workshops and retreats in the United States and abroad since 2010. And she's a psychotherapist with a deep interest in somatic and non-ordinary state approaches to trauma work. So she passionately supports individuals in coming home into their authentic selves through this work. We also have with us Amber Balk, PhD in transpersonal, she's a PhD and she's a transpersonal psychologist, a researcher, and a community activist. She's especially passionate about community dream work. She teaches and facilitates this transpersonal practice as a way to witness, honor, and share with others by deeply contemplating and opening to the messages of nighttime dreams within a group setting. We have also with us today Lada Schultz, who's an experienced holistic practitioner, psychotherapist, group facilitator, trainer, and certified holotropic breathwork facilitator. So she has more than 30 years of experience in the healing arts and spirituality to draw upon. And she runs monthly and I think yearly training sessions in holotropic breathwork out of Australia. And so welcome everybody from this wonderful team. I'm so honored to be part of this team of people who support the healing process, very deep healing processes within individuals through this work. And we're going to get into what exactly is holotropic breathwork, what are non-ordinary states, how can they heal somebody, what's specific about holotropic breathwork, and what does it look like? What does the process look like? What are some experiences that come out of it? But before we do, because that's the real meaty, juicy part, so we'll keep you in suspense for a little bit. Before we do, if it's all right, I'd love to open it up to my co-facilitators here to actually get a little bit of a sense of the history of holotropic breathwork and how this practice actually came about, just right before we get into actually what it is, what it looks like. Would anybody be willing to talk about the history of holotropic breathwork, what kind of field it stems from, and how it developed?
I would.
Go for it, Ren. Thank you.
Okay, great. Wonderful to be here. Nice to see everybody. Just so you know, you can either have speaker view or gallery view up on the top right-hand corner, so you can change that setting for yourselves. Holotropic breathwork, of course, the words are from holos, which means wholeness in Greek, and tropein, which means moving toward, like a heliotropic plant moves toward the sun, helios. It was developed by Stan and Christina Grof in the mid-1980s. Grof had been one of the foremost researchers in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And when psychedelics were made illegal in the research community, he and his partner Christina were looking for a non-drug substitute for his earlier work. And deep breathing, of course, has long roots in India and other traditions. What they eventually came up with was a very powerful technique which uses deep and rapid breathing, evocative music, focused body work, and mandala drawing. And it's usually done in a group setting. People have an opportunity to do the breath work and also to sit. So you do it in a pair, and one person will breathe before lunch and one after lunch. And the sitting is a very important and special part of this work. It's good training for relationships in general. It is good training for sitting for people in other modalities as well, including psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, though this is, of course, is a non-drug approach. The Groffs and others have done, I mean, hundreds of thousands of sessions around the world have been done now since the mid-'80s. It's a very safe technique. Unlike psychedelic sessions, this involves effort of the participants. You have to breathe, more deeply and rapidly than usual to keep the process going. And if you get uncomfortable with what's happening or you want to slow it down, you can just slow down your breathing. So that's definitely an advantage of it.
So my understanding, and I'd love to get my colleagues' feedback on this, is that, holotropic breathwork is a way to access a non-ordinary state of reality. And why we want to access non-ordinary state or altered state is because in kind of consensus reality, in our everyday, very functional mode, we have a kind of an ego in place, a kind of a state of mind in which we are able to attend to the practical kind of particularities of life. Like we have to drive a car, we have to get to work, we have to, schedule things, we have to kind of attend to this and that. And my understanding of the work of Stan Grof, when he began working with psychedelics to access altered states, and then when he transitioned into using the breath in holotropic breathwork to access altered states, is that it turns down the volume perhaps on that state of mind, which is very practical, kind of ego-oriented state of mind. I'm not sure really the right metaphor to say, but something like it turns down the volume, or somehow allows that part of the mind to stand aside a bit, so that a deeper healing intelligence within the psyche can address whatever is kind of subconsciously needing to be healed. And so we have a little bit of sense of the history of holotropic breathwork, and that Stan Grof, the psychologist, was working with psychedelics and using those to help people heal, and then those were made illegal, and he developed holotropic breathwork. What is it about the state itself? What is it about the process itself that allows, whether we're talking about holotropic breathwork or we're talking about the use of psychedelics, what is it about the state that allows such deep healing? I'd love to get anybody's comments on that, and also I think perhaps maybe Laurel had something to say as well.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So two pieces of that. One is one of the understandings of how holotropic breathwork and non-ordinary states work in general works is that there's what's called a disinhibitory effect in the brain when we're in that kind of a state, whether through breathing or through the use of chemicals or other methods. There are ways that we kind of, there's the normal day-to-day stuff that keep our brains busy, but then there's ways that we resist, kind of tamp things down, that put them into the unconscious, things that we don't necessarily want to deal with, whether we consciously don't want to deal with them or unconsciously, but they're in there. And trauma is a good example of that. And so there's a way that with something like breath work, we can access things more easily because we're not holding it back in the same way. There's a way that we can sort of open up. And the other piece of that is, Stan talks about this sort of dual awareness, where in a non-ordinary state, we can be accessing the sort of the emotional content of something that we're processing, but at the same time have a foot in this reality. So for instance, with something like, if you're processing trauma, you can be in both places at the same time, in both times at the same time. You can be accessing the trauma from the past, but at the same time you're here in your adult body, in this reality. And there's something about that allows us to integrate things that were never integrated before. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, that's beautiful and kind of poetic in a way. I mean, my interpretation, you can tell me if you feel it's correct, is that we're in a setting in which we're safe. We have facilitators, we have support, and that's in the present moment. And in the present moment, we're engaged in a healing modality that allows the kind of ego defenses to lighten up, relax a little bit, so that whatever's in the subconscious that needs to heal can come out. Experiences from childhood, experiences, we're going to get into this, but, experiences, we could even have had birth trauma, experiences of trauma when we were being born. We could have experience of past life trauma. And those things come up because the psyche knows that I'm actually in a safe space. I'm actually in a safe space. So this kind of material can be allowed now to come up and be brought to conscious awareness, be reconciled somehow in the kind of healing process that our own psyche has within itself in its own way. And so does that sound like I'm doing justice to your description?
Yes, and actually more eloquently put.
No, yours was more eloquently put. So why don't we touched upon, so there's this process when we enter into non-ordinary states of having one foot in the present moment and one foot in whatever is the kind of unsolved trauma or experiences from the past that are kind of somehow trapped inside. And we talked about one of the important parts is, in these healing modalities, we tend to have a focus, oftentimes because the modality is named after the catalyst, we tend to have a focus on the catalyst. For instance, holotropic breathwork, we're talking about the breath, or psychedelic therapy, depth psychedelic work, we're talking about psychedelics. So there is a catalyst there, but equally as important is the environment we are in. So, for instance, Stan Grof, when he first developed his work with psychedelics, it was, in a safe space, a room with a therapist on either side, a male and a female therapist there to kind of make sure that the person is taken care of. And so basically the current position, the current kind of setting that the person was in was a setting in which was conducive to allowing down one's own defenses, allowing whatever was needed to come up, whatever it is. And again, it's a setting where anything is accepted, anything and everything can come up. And so with holotropic breathwork, there's a cultivation of something similar in that there's the space that we're in, there's the facilitators there. Ren already mentioned sitters, that the breathwork is done in pairs. So one person is undergoing the depth process and the other person is the sitter, which means that it's kind of like the caretaker for that person. And if you guys have better wording for this, I welcome you to chime in. Somebody who's there to help, be there to hold space for that person and allow that person just to be safe so that whatever comes up can come up. And would anybody like to add anything to that, or add any actual illustrations of what that might look like from my team? Lotta, I believe, is raising her hand.
Yeah. Yes, well put, James. And I guess what's different also, I guess, if people experience psychedelic to holotropic breathwork, is that you have kind of like the adult self as an ally. And so there's kind of, and we have that all around the world. As holotropic breathwork facilitators, we all have the same training. And so there's a word stop. So people can always say stop, and then they come out of the session. So they're always a choice. And for me, the word safe is an interesting word to use because, and I can speak from my own experiences, sometimes I have felt so unsafe, like really unsafe. But so whatever has happened external, what we do with holotropic breathwork, the invitation is to take it internal and work with our own inner healer intelligence. So it's not therapy. So even me as a facilitator, I'm absolutely not a therapist when I step in. I hold the space, and we trust and believe that each individual's own inner healer will bring up the most relevant material that's unfinished material or that's wanting healing. So that's what, to me, that's so different to other styles of breath work and any other. And for me, when I came to this work, I had trained in another breath work, which was great too. And I was part of the International Breathwork Conference. And when I first experienced holotropic breathwork, it was interesting. It was like, I went, wow, have I got an inner healer? Yeah, so I just went, whatever this is, whatever it's going to take, yeah, it just felt right for me. But that's for me what really makes a difference to anything else, I guess. So we create a container where so that you don't get hurt, you don't hurt anyone. Like there's agreements we come up with. But sometimes, I have felt very unsafe, but I have needed, that's kind of what's come up for me. I experienced quite a lot of trauma in my childhood. So then the invitation is to make that kind of feeling unsafe as big as I can, but then, so it kind of gets to be complete. And then I get like internally a whole new sense of feeling safe. Does that make sense? So it's not like a thinking process. For me, that was a felt experience, what it feels like to feel safe. Am I making sense?
Yeah, can I repeat it back to you and see if I'm understanding correctly? So in the environment, because the environment is itself safe and supportive to your own inner healer doing its work, your own inner healer is your own inner kind of compass of healing is allowing to come up whatever needed to come up. And for you at that time, it was unfinished emotions around not feeling safe. Is that?
And then we have what we call, or what Stan calls, like a corrective experience. So I then got to experience, once I'd expressed that feeling unsafe, and then I got to ask for what I needed, which was to be held. So I kind of had a whole new sense of feeling safe in my body. And for me, then it's absolutely gifted me what talk therapy and other that are very helpful for integration. But the holotropic breathwork setting has gifted me new felt senses that are lasting. So passionate about this. Yeah.
So when you say that you were able to ask for an embrace, are you referring to the sitter, your partner in the experience, or facilitator that you're able to ask them for?
So this group, this work by Stan and Christina is made for groups. I know people often ask sort of individual session, but the reason why it's made for groups too is so sometimes I've asked my sitter, but I've also had more people that have been able to come and hold me, or when I've had to express, anger, the scream, I couldn't scream when I was little, etc. That I've had enough facilitators around that have made sure that I can do that in a way that's been safe, without hurting myself or anyone else.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Wonderful.
And some sessions I have, and that it doesn't have to be cathartic. Like for some people, they can like completely still through the whole 3 hours and again have an extraordinary experience. So we again trust and absolutely trust that each individual's inner healer knows better than any of us facilitators or anyone else.
Oh, beautiful. So again, we're, in case anybody's come on recently, we're talking about the healing potential of non-ordinary states or altered states. And specifically when done in a setting in which the participant is taken care of. They're in a safe setting. The particular modality we're talking about is holotropic breathwork. So the breath is the catalyst for accessing the altered state, which means it kind of the ego functions, our normal everyday consciousness functions they've kind of fade to the background a bit so that our unconscious material can come up in that safe setting. So I'm wondering if one of the facilitators would be willing to explore I know Ren, you're quite good at this, explore what is the vast kind of list, or I guess it wouldn't be a list because it's endless, but kind of the array of different types of healing experiences that somebody can have once they've accessed a non-ordinary state, such as in holotropic breathwork.
Sure, but I'd like to hear from Amber. I think Amber had something to say. You still want to hear?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Ren. Well, my comment was kind of going back to the conversation on the terminology of, non-ordinary or altered states of consciousness. And I think the phrase I prefer to use personally is expanded states of consciousness or awareness. And
Nice.
And going back to, I agreed with what everyone has shared so far. I think what Stan Grof and others who have done similar research in psychedelic therapy and altered states of consciousness, expanded states, I think that especially Stan has done an excellent job of articulating and acknowledging ancient forms of wisdom. And, he refers to those as the technologies of the sacred. And these are things that have been accessible throughout the history of humanity in various cultures around the planet, that there have been ways to enter into ritual or ceremony, and it's setting that intention of wanting to experience something larger. And, often it is like you began with saying, there's a calling internally of like, I want to show up for a particular experience. And then the intention that is set, for healing and wholeness is really important. And then the community is really important, the support, and then, the actual practice itself. So my understanding of holotropic breathwork is that, it's all of those elements, and it's also the music. The music affects us on cellular levels. And, I think all of those things combined, my understanding is that Stan had done the research into all of these various, ceremonies, rituals, ways of holding these types of experiences, and kind of condensed it down to those really important elements that tend to be seen across a wide range of different cultures. And so put together, they're just super powerful. And it's my understanding of breathwork, holotropic breathwork, is that it's, a very modern take on something so ancient. And for me, when I do breathwork, it feels like I'm tapping into my primal humanness, and it connects me to this really cosmic, primal, beautiful healing thing. It's just an amazing experience. So that's what thank you.
Amber, that is beautiful. I thank you for that. That really, we started out talking about holotropic breathwork and its history as started by Stan Grof, and, Stan's in his late 80s now. So we're talking about his biographical life and the history going back that far, but you attached it actually to traditions going back much farther, in the sense that, in cultures, ancient cultures leading up to today, there is oftentimes an outlet for accessing altered states in such a way that this type of healing can happen. And, I actually recalled, I think Stan Grof said this, or something like it, when you were talking, that, and also the way you talked about, that sense of feeling called, that maybe as cultures develop throughout the world, human culture, maybe this is a need, maybe this is a basic human need. We obviously have a need for food, We have a need to protect ourselves and survive, contribute to society. But maybe this is also a need, the need to be able to kind of touch a part of ourselves that is not necessarily visible on the surface level of reality. If it's something that has recurred so much through so many cultures over time.
Yeah, I think that's especially true for Western cultures, because there are many indigenous cultures intact today that are very familiar with, what we consider altered and expanded states of consciousness. And I think that in the West, the ego has gotten so narrow, so focused and narrow that it's really imperative. It's imperative for our well-being and for the state of our planet, I believe, for us to learn how to access this ancient wisdom again.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. That also, I think, is a great kind of jumping off point into what are the different categories, I guess you could say, or different arrays of experiences. Because I feel that, from my experience with holotropic breathwork and with non-ordinary states of reality, there is something about opening up our psyches and our awareness to an expanded view of reality, an expanded experience of reality that is actually about healing us as individuals, but it's about something more than that. Like you were saying about Western culture, that it's become kind of very ego focused on the individual. So, that's if somebody comes in feeling that I want to access healing through holotropic breath work, through non-ordinary states of reality, that's wonderful. That's like a calling coming from inside. I've noticed at the same time that much of the healing experience that comes from these states is actually an experience of being able to experience something that's larger than oneself, that's larger than one's ego. So it's, past life experiences, ancestral experiences, being able to experience something that is, maybe the life of somebody else, or even some other species of animal or plant or something like that. So in a way, it's actually, there is, I guess, some component of it that is healing by connecting us to the larger community of life, both past, present. So with that, shall we explore some of the different types of experiences that those could be general categories, or they could be actually anecdotal stories of students or of you guys yourselves?
Sure, I'd love to.
Thank you, Ron.
Some of the healing mechanisms in holotropic states seem to be like an intensification of conventional healing mechanisms, so that people can have a deepened sense of trust with the people supporting them. As Lotta mentioned, people who had deprivation issues, unmet needs in infancy, or crises of basic trust, can experience emotional corrective experiences, and the breath work or the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy leaves people in a more open and vulnerable situation, and then they can receive the appropriate human contact and support that they didn't get when they were younger. There's also therapeutic effects from facing death. The level of the psyche that Stan calls the perinatal level, surrounding birth. So it's birth and death. The root of all fear seems to be the fear of death, according to Groff. And there's a finite amount of this fear in the psyche. And by facing our birth, reliving elements of the birth that we couldn't fully face at the time, but which are still lodged in the cells and tissues of our body, we can work through that fear. And from that point on, people can live in this world knowing that they will die at some point, that they are mortal, but they don't have this overwhelming sense of fear in the background of their life. Another healing mechanism, and probably the most important of all, which you've all touched on, is that this movement toward wholeness. Human beings seem to possess two modes of being in the world. One Groff calls the holotropic, which is moving toward matter. And that is the side of us which is that we are a body, we are an ego, we live in the here and now world in a certain time and space. And we have to be comfortable in that world if we want to take care of everyday responsibilities and, you know, be taken seriously and so on. But in order to solve some of our deeper problems and to access higher meaning, it seems that we have to periodically, as Amber mentioned, enter holotropic states or moving toward wholeness states. And some of these experiences can include, as you mentioned, James, identification with the consciousness of other people, groups of people, specific animals or other life forms. We can also, past life experiences are another category. People can access various archetypal terrains, heavens, paradises, hells, mythological sequences. There are tremendous sources of ecstasy and bliss and comfort and reassurance and higher meaning in these transpersonal realms. And it is so worth the effort that it takes to work through our traumas. All healing can be seen as a opening or widening the pathway back to the divine consciousness or the universal field of consciousness. And the highest experiences seem to be direct confrontation with or identification with the universal mind or the absolute consciousness. And when people access these, they have a sense that their deepest questions have been answered. Everything they have ever lost or could ever lose has been given back. Everything is contained in those states. So those are some of the basic categories.
That was just poetic. I mean, it's so beautiful. I mean, I know you're speaking to the experience, and the experience is poetic itself. That's like, that's beautiful. So thank you. Does anybody have, anybody on the team have any kind of anecdotal or maybe personal accounts which illustrate the different types of experience? I know Lotta, you so brilliantly, you know, described the process that you went through. I know that, you know, we on the team have experienced holotropic breathwork at a great depth, and also that we have many facilitators on the team who have facilitated others going through these types of experiences. So I think, I guess what I'm saying is it all right if I just kind of open it up to the team to kind of, you know, add what you like, and if there's, or add from your kind of past experiences, what you feel? How does that sound?
I'm happy to share. I just wanted to pause in case anyone wanted to go first.
You can start us off.
You know, there's so much that could be said. I'm trying to keep this, you know, short. I actually came to holotropic breathwork as a practice, as a big skeptic. I had first heard about it when I got to grad school at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in Palo Alto. And I remember hearing about it and thinking, like, it sounded too good to be true. And then it also kind of, there was part of me that was like, oh, well, a lot of it's narrowed down to birth trauma, which felt kind of like another way of like blaming the mother for our issues. But many years later, after, you know, really being immersed into the thoughts and the theories of transpersonal psychology, I opened up more to exploring it. And I'm so glad that I did, because actually it has become my primary psychospiritual practice. And I do other things to integrate my experiences, like Jungian psychology and analysis and dream work and journaling. But my experience of breath work has been very, it usually for me is extremely multi-layered. So I have a sense of, like, maybe something might start with a physical pain, and I'm like, oh, what's that? And then I might ask a facilitator to help me make it bigger. And they do that with body work, a specific type of body work, which is really just the gentle, like applying of, usually like their hand, you put their hand where it needs to be, and then I'll kind of push into it. And I'm the one that's making it bigger by pushing into it. And that usually for me ends up being like a doorway into a very multi-layered experience. So I might see a memory from my childhood while I'm simultaneously experiencing my body in this feeling. And then I might simultaneously have a scene from a past life, or what feels like a past life, very convincingly. And then there might be very, countless, endless, also other layers that are simultaneously present. And I don't really have to do anything with it other than experience it. So for me, that's what the general overview of my experience tends to be. And then I come through it feeling renewed and revitalized and clearer about who I am, my purpose in life, what I want to do, who I want to be, why I'm here.
Oh, gorgeous. Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Would anybody else like to add to that wonderful account? Don't be shy. I know that you all have tales of, I know Lotta, maybe even you as well, Laurel, did you both just come off of running a retreat?
No, I think Lotta did. I haven't.
Okay.
Not this week.
Not this week.
Yeah, I guess for me, what's been the life-changing part of doing breath work for the last 10 years is, realizing that I have an inner healer, realizing, and on a day-to-day basis, that has looked like trusting myself in a way that I never did before. Really being able to listen to my heart, listen to my gut, and kind of move through the world in a more whole way, instead of trying to logic my way through it or analyze my way through it, which was kind of my previous default. And with that has come just a huge amount of trust in myself and in the universe, in life, which is, that's been life-changing. So that the whole inner healer idea is a very powerful one when when you can connect with it and believe it, trust it, surrender to it, then miracles happen. So.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. I can add to that from my own experience that, understanding that there's an inner healer within my own psyche, it's almost, I began, in the beginning of the talk, I mentioned that, if my body gets cut, I just have to kind of prepare the cut to be healed. I don't really actually have to heal it itself. My body has its own intelligence. My body wants to be whole, so it will heal the wound. And the psyche is the same way. And I know my personal experience of that has allowed me to first get in touch with a sense that, there is the states that come up for me in the experiences that come up for me in non-ordinary states and in holotropic breathwork are okay. It's okay for them to come up because they're guided by my psyche's own inner intelligence. It's okay for them to come up. And so then even in my ordinary life, when I experience things like if I experience anxiety or I experience something, some type of emotional state that is that would otherwise be alarming, I have a sense of trust that, there's something happening. I don't have to know what it is. I don't have to understand with my intellectual mind what's happening. It's something, the organizational principle within my own psyche is doing its thing. And then, the even kind of broader unfolding of that I've found in my life is that I don't even necessarily have to think of my psyche as limited to what's inside my own head. You know, I oftentimes will experience meetings with people, meetings with, you know, experiences. I have experiences, I meet with people, and I end up in situations and I realize, like, well, this situation's actually here for my healing. This meeting this person is actually here for my healing. So my psyche isn't actually so much limited to what's the chemistry inside my body. It's actually my life itself, you know, my actual, what I experience, my sphere of experience, my life. And so so then I can kind of expand that even further to see, like, well, life itself has a healing intelligence. Life itself has, I know Ren used a word, I can't remember exactly what it is, and he stepped away for a moment. It was, maybe the other facilitators are familiar with this word. It was something like corrective, emotionally corrective or something like that. Yeah, so I just want to just keep it open for any more personal accounts, if anybody feels called to express a personal account, or, you know, an experience of somebody in, you know, one of their students or something in the group they're facilitating.
Sure. Oh, Laura, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I am. So for me, what comes to mind, I agree what everybody has shared, or can really relate to it. But for me, and even though I had trained and was a facilitator in another style of breathwork, I didn't realize how much I was affected by my external, and how much, again, I think that the medical model, there's so much a need for it, but I was very conditioned to that in order to be okay, things out here had to be okay. So what I then experienced when I started the holotropic breathwork, that I have no power over people, places, and things. I have no power about what happens, but what I do have power over is what's happening in here. And that was huge for me, because then all of a sudden I started to go a lot more internal and create this safety that I thought that I needed to have, or only could have, if everything was okay out here. And yes, it's been absolutely life-changing for me in that way. Also the trust, like the way, I don't like being a victim, but when I look back, I was a victim a lot in my life, because you know, there was a lot of, I sort of again went, oh no, here we go again, not again. You know, this is happening. Whereas now, the way I look at it is like, okay, here it happens again. I trust life. It's presenting me with a situation where there's more healing to be done. So rather than being a victim, I actually now have much more a curiosity, and life is a lot more interesting than it used to be. So, I mean, that's just a little part. But in all ways, what you were saying too, James, when you talked about the wound. So Stan talks about this too. So it's like, if we have a splinter, get a splinter in our body, the body will naturally want to push it out. And that's also how I look now, and trusting my psyche again in a healer, when there's something that's incomplete that wants to be felt. And that's again in this setting where I find it very supportive that I have people I can call on to make it, as Amber said, to make it as big as I can. Rather than contract, for me, it's expanding. So these days through this work, I live more in my heart, whereas I used to absolutely live in my head all the time, which was exhausting. So at 52, 53, I think I'm turning, I have more energy and I have less pain in my body, absolutely, than I had when I was 30 and 40. So I'll keep going.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a bit excited about it, as you can tell.
I had a Kundalini experience when I was 22, 1982, and I spent a couple years kind of dealing with that. It was very intense. As you know, it sort of forces us to feel our inner process, and the Kundalini kind of puts that process in overdrive. I went down to Esalen Institute during that period, and I was able to do a few different sessions that really helped in that integration. And one I remember, it went about 5 hours long. It was a very unusually long breathwork session, and I was reliving toxic womb memories, disturbances of intrauterine life. You know, my mom had 4 kids in a row and didn't really want to be a mom, and it wasn't the most pleasant experience for her to have me inside her. And she had a lot of sickness, morning sickness, and so on. And it wasn't the easiest environment to live in when I was so little. So the female sitter lied down beside me and just hugged me through the whole thing. And I felt like I was having a corrective experience there. I had the sense that I was getting the feeling of belonging and safety and peace that I didn't have in the womb a lot of the time. And that's a really important part of this work. And I was really grateful for that. That was one of my most memorable breathwork sessions.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Ollie, for offering such personal accounts. The personal kind of meaning, that comes through in these experiences. It's can be really felt in your words and your experiences, and that's I think we as humans, we have an ability to connect. And when you really see somebody else talking about something that's actually really very meaningful, it calls forth in us that meaning, and we kind of connect on that point. I definitely felt that. And what I'd like to do now, if it's okay with my team, is begin to open it up for questions and discussions. But actually, before we do that, I just want to put it out there so that people know they have access to this therapy. For instance, Ren is in the Northwest, British Columbia. Laurel's in Washington State. And Amber, I think you're also in the Northwest, if I'm not mistaken.
I am, but I'm not a certified facilitator.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
So they, and also Lotta is in Australia and near Sydney. And so there, this team is running this healing modality, holotropic breathwork, at different times. We as a team are actually getting together kind of like as an all-star team in February, in the first week of February 3rd through the 10th in Mexico. So we're going to be taking a group of people down to Mexico, and having a holotropic breathwork intensive there, in which we also include some other modalities like archetypal astrology, group dream work, body work. We're going to be right next to some Mayan ruins, so there's going to be a bit of adventure involved. So anyways, we're kind of, one of the reasons that we're on a call as a team is because we're the A team that's going down to Mexico, and we still have a number of slots open for anybody who's interested. Would anybody like to highlight any of our kind of characteristics of our Mexico retreat for the gang?
Sure, I can start. Yeah, we're really excited about it. We hope that you can join us. It will be an unusually safe environment because of the number of facilitators there. We'll be doing the breath work on a palapa, which is this really large outdoor gazebo. So you'll be breathing in the Mayan jungle. Be pretty special. We'll have a dance at least one night. We'll be feasting on fresh Mexican food 3 times a day. We'll be doing 2 outings to several of the most interesting Mayan ruins in Central America, in Chichen Itza and Tulum. We'll also be swimming in the ocean the very first morning, and we'll have some probably other opportunities to do that. Also in the I forget what they call the sort of sunken caves that are now lakes that are spread through that area.
Cenotes.
Cenotes, yeah. It's the only place in the world that they exist. Another interesting feature of the Yucatan is right off of Cancun, I believe, is where the big asteroid hit 65 million years ago that wiped out most of the dinosaurs, except for, the ancestors of the birds. Our birds are dinosaurs. There will be time to enjoy nature. There's a swimming pool there. The heart of the workshop will be these 4 breathwork sessions, and you'll have an opportunity to do 2 of your own sessions and to sit twice. There will be time for you to book bodywork sessions with our other colleague, James Cunningham. And I'll let Amber talk about the dream work and any other comments from anyone else.
Yeah, it's too bad that James Cunningham isn't here, because he is really wonderful with healing body work. I can definitely testify for that. So, but yeah, I'll be facilitating some group dream work, which is basically, the way I hold it, is another way of accessing a more expanded state of consciousness, because every night when we dream, we have this innate kind of inbuilt mechanism that expands us beyond what we normally are in our regular everyday waking world. So it's a really huge honor and pleasure to get to bring that to the group, and it really tends to deepen the sense of community and wonder and awe. So I'm really excited to bring that.
Thank you, Amber and Ren. I'm also there going to be offering archetypal astrology insights along with Ren. This is a great, the art using astrology is a great way to get a glimpse into what is happening. We have the psyche has a healing intelligence. When we do holotropic breathwork, material comes up for us, and it kind of comes up and comes out and gets reconciled, resolved. And sometimes we wonder what was that? What's that all about, you know? And archetypal astrology is just another lens that helps us. We can quite easily see that process and kind of get even another layer of depth of understanding of what is the process of what's happening in our unfolding currently. So we're going to be as a team, just like on this call, we're going to be as a team in Mexico, February 3rd through the 10th. I'm going to send out I'm going to send out to the email list for this call information on that retreat. I'll also put it in the chat. And if you weren't on the email list for this call, you can just put your email in the chat, and I'll make sure to include it. And I think Lada, it looks like Lada, you also want to add something as well. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's quite a big trip from Australia to, so you can fly to Dallas, Cancun, and it's only a couple of hours away from Tulum. But Qantas has a good special on at the moment, and also you can pay it off over 10 months. I didn't realize that airlines did that. And I wanted to mention too that in holotropic breathwork, so the preparation, session and integration are all equally important. And so with integration, we'll be having some art material as well. So after your session, if you want to do a mandala drawing, journaling, and that the invitation is to participate as much or as little as you like, that we here as a team to support you to have your own unique experience. So I think that's important to mention too, that people can say yes or no to what we offer, what feels right for them. But there will be time to journal, to do artwork, and to integrate. Yeah, brilliant.
Yes, and that also highlights that it's really kind of it's a community that's happening, you know, down there in Mexico. So we are the facilitators, and the people joining us we're all together. We make up the community. So it's kind of it'll be a communal experience in which you are allowed to have all the space you need individually for your own process as well. The community will be there as a healing community to help and support each other. Yeah. So we welcome you. We welcome anybody who feels called to explore this at a deeper depth, experientially. We welcome you to join us and tap into that healing community. So with that, we've covered quite a range of topics, and I would love to see if people have questions. And I was thinking, I welcome feedback from my team leaders here, that I was thinking we could, whoever, we're a little new at the Zoom thing. So one way we could do it is we could unmute everybody, and whoever has a question could have a question. There's also something here that I think allows us to raise a hand, although I haven't mastered that. What we could do is, if you would be willing, if you have a question, just to say, maybe to kind of preface, maybe just with your name and where you are currently. That way we can just kind of get to know each other better. So what do you think, Ren? Should we just unmute and then kind of encourage people to just jump in?
It might be quite staticky. People could put up their hand. That's one way.
How do they do that? How do they raise their hand?
Like if they're on the camera, they can just.
Oh yeah. Okay, so they literally raise their hand. Yeah. Okay.
Also, a chat feature over on the side where you could ping Ren and say, hand up, and then Ren can unmute people.
Okay, let's do that. All right.
Or you can write a question in the chat if people don't want to go on camera.
Yeah, you can write your question in the chat. Excellent idea. So let's open it up. We've talked about some pretty wild experiences that are very different from our everyday experience of reality, kind of consensus reality, and emotional healing. As you've been watching, has anything come up about what we're talking about? Curiosities, unanswered questions? I can't actually see everybody, so I don't know if somebody's physically raising their hand. If anybody else spots somebody raising their hand, let me know. Okay, no, I can't.
I'm gonna unmute all. Everyone is unmuted now.
All right, cool, including the bird. Yeah, that's a bit noisy. So who would like to ask a question?
He said that that information is wrong.
Okay, Ari.
Okay, I'm going to mute all except Ari, okay?
So this all sounds very interesting, and it has aroused my curiosity. And I think that the question that I would pose first is, we've heard a lot about the offerings in the northwest of the U.S. and Australia.
Ari, can you speak a little louder? Sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Is this better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you very much.
So we've heard about the offerings in the northwest of the United States, and I wonder whether there are similar groups or institutions in the East Coast that might be more accessible for some of us in, I don't know, at least near the DC area, such as James and myself.
So Ari, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get a list and send it out to the email list, because I actually don't know the answer. I'm recently I was raised in DC, but I'm recently back to DC, and most of my connections are on the West Coast because that's where I've been living. So but the answer is there are.
Okay.
I know there are. I just don't have the names yet, and I will send that. Amber has something.
Yeah. Well, there is a holotropic breathwork kind of network, and one of the ways to find information about that is through Groff Transpersonal Training. I believe it's holotropic.com or something like that, but if you search for GTT, they do modules in many places, some on the East Coast and Taos, Joshua Tree, so and in other countries as well. But I definitely know that there are a group of facilitators on the East Coast. I want to say there are some in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, so relatively close.
Thank you, Amber.
There are actually on the GTT website, there's two lists. of facilitators around the world, and you can access it on their website.
Oh, great.
So I'm going to include
everything's on the internet.
that?
You know, it's just everything's on the internet. I just figured I'd ask directly. So.
and to make it even easier, I'm going to include that link in the email that I send out after this. I'm actually going to include it with a wonderful interview. I can't stop talking enough about this interview. There's a gentleman named Tim Ferriss, who's actually has a really widely listened to podcast. And what he usually does is he usually interviews the highest performers in any one field. So, you know, you'll have like investors and sports people and stuff like that. But his most recent interview was actually of Stan Grof. And so he interviewed Stan Grof as the highest performer in his field. And so they spent the entire time talking about non-ordinary states, the power and healing of non-ordinary states, the history of it, holotropic breathwork. And it's just, it's really an exceptional interview. So I'm going to be sending that out to the group email list too. It's just a podcast. You know, you can just pop it on and listen to it at any time. It's basically, you know, covering a lot of what we talked about from the founder of much of it himself. Does anybody else have any other questions? I imagine that there must be some questions out there. Okay, so Kim is raising her hand.
Everybody.
Hi, Kim.
Oh, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so I don't so much have questions at the moment. I've taken lots of notes whilst the webinar's been going, so I can, you know, look back over what's been talked about today. It's been so interesting and so informative, and yeah, I've really loved listening to everybody and what everyone's had to say today, and look forward to meeting everyone in Mexico on in February.
Look forward to meeting you.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Yeah, so I guess really all I wanted to say was that, and just that I'm fairly, I wouldn't say uneducated, but I'm not overly informed about the holotropic breath work, and but I'm learning and I'm taking it all in, and I want to know more. And I've had a few sessions over the last couple of years, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to the journey, I guess.
Perfect. Perfect. That's the right attitude.
Yeah, that's about it. But thanks so much for this morning. It's been great. I'm so glad I got up and, you know, made the effort to be here.
Great way to start the day at 7 a.m., huh?
For sure. It's been a great, yeah, kickstart to the day.
Thanks for sharing, Kim.
Does anybody else have questions or anything that you'd like to share? Maybe you have had an experience of a non-ordinary state, and you'd like to kind of talk about that and make some, you know, get some understanding around that. Ari? Ren, would you be willing to unmute Ari? Sorry, Ari, we're going to unmute you in a second here. Oh, there you go.
My comment was that I've never had an altered experience, and I'm so jealous. So that's probably one of the reasons why I'm curious and eager to have at least to do some of this exploratory work.
Beautiful. Yeah, I hear you. I honor that. That's wonderful. It's, you know, a lot of because the experiences can be so different from our everyday reality, there can be a sense that it's an experience other than you know, everyday reality. Yet at the same time, there are aspects of just our everyday reality here and now that are also there in our experience of non-ordinary states. For instance, feeling a calling, or just an intuition or a sense that you feel called, for instance, to join this call, you know, or to explore this work. You know, sometimes we get a voice inside us that's pointing us in the direction of our next step of growth, even if we don't know what that next step of growth is, or what is the growth that's beyond that next step. We oftentimes don't know, but there's something, there's some that's, and my feeling is, it's probably similar to the psyche's own healing kind of intelligence inside that heals itself. It's probably related, would be my guess, when we feel, some type of intuition, some type of calling in a direction. So yeah, does that hopefully that encourages you.
I wanted to comment
Yes.
that just kind of made me think of something that is really common in an event, for holotropic breathwork. It's very, very common to hear that there's a sense of homecoming with, the community and the process, and that it's this familiar, even though it's something new often, that it's kind of what you're describing, so I remember the first time that I did breath work, I was terrified. But once I got into it, I felt so, the feeling of homecoming is the best way to describe it for me.
Beautiful.
And then the community too, the support often is the experience of this is what community should be. It's not perfect. There are issues within the community, things come up and people get triggered or whatever. But it's all, something to work with. But for the most part, and I hear this from a lot of my friends and colleagues who also are facilitators or just do breath work as their practice, that there's that sense of this is how humans are supposed to take care of each other. So it's a real honor in that way to be there for other people as well.
And I think in that too, Amber, the gift in and Tav Sparks, who's the owner of the Groff Transpersonal Training, says really well too, the gift of having people that care enough to be there and hold space without wanting to fix or rescue me, that I'm as I am, okay, but trusting that my inner healer has got it. That's really, I think that's, as you talked about earlier on, is something that we don't get as much anymore, that people just to hold space and believe, just with kindness and care. Another thing that I thought was worth mentioning is that I have never had 2 sessions that were ever the same. And we go into this work without having an intention. So, which again has been helpful for my thinking mind and control, because I go in there and I never know what's going to happen. And that has given me more trust, because again, my inner healer has got it. So it's not what my mind might think, okay, I need more of this, I need to fix this. No, it's not. I go in there and then whatever will be revealed. So it makes it interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And, well, there was something, I kind of lost my train of thought on what you had initially said. It's extremely empowering, to go into community where people trust that you know what to do with your process and to stay out of it.
Yeah. So when people leave, they can pat themselves on the shoulder and say they did it. Their inner healer did it. Yeah, that's, for me, I don't get that anywhere else. Yeah.
No.
That's one of the biggest differences between holotropic breathwork and some of the other types of breathwork out there in the world, is that it's not about the facilitators. It's really, really about the breather. It's about you. And we're just there to create the safe space and support you, and then stay out of your way. We're not going to sit there and tell you what to do, how to do it. We're not going to interpret your experience. We're not going to direct you other than, kind of the basic instructions. And I mean, that's huge. So many different modalities. You end up, somebody is healing you. You go to someone and they do something and it heals you. And in this case, even though it may be a bit frustrating at first, I think, because often we like people to tell us here's how this is going to work and this is what you're going to do. Ultimately, it's incredibly empowering.
Yeah. And that's why, as Tav Sparks and the fabulous mentors have taught me too, is that it's kind of when you go in as facilitator, the more modalities you've done, the more training you've done, the more unlearning you have to do. I've had to do a lot of unlearning because I use other work in my, other modalities in my work, but when I step into this, it's absolutely not about me or my knowing. It's about letting all that go and trust. And that's, it's interesting work.
I'm sorry about the interruption on my end. The building superintendent had to check the windows and he couldn't do it at another time. So what's tromping through here? This is a great book, Holotropic Breathwork. I've got the cover somewhere. Some really wonderful mandala drawings in here, sessions that people have done over the years, and lots of information. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Amber. Look at that. And this is such a wonderful book, The Adventure of Self-Discovery. I've been rereading this. I read it in the 80s several times, and really wonderful information in here. Stan had a great comment. This approach doesn't rely on the brilliantly timed comments of the facilitators. We don't intervene unless you ask for something. We get out of the way and allow your own innate healing intelligence to select the material for that session. And we know, because we've done lots of our own sessions, that these sessions will resolve on their own. And in the rare cases that they don't, we have a number of things we can do at the end of the sessions to help you resolve it, like the focused body work that Amber was talking about, and others. So it would really be wonderful if you could come, and we'll have a self-exploration adventure together here, a healing adventure.
So again, I'm going to include in an email link to the retreat. I can also include those books, and I can include the link to the interview with Stan Groff. Fabulous interview. So there's lots of riches and treasures to come. Does anybody have any other comments or questions? Ren?
I have one last comment. I forgot to mention, I'll be showing a slideshow on Stan Groff's research into the Mayan prophecies. Most of you probably remember the solstice of 2012 was the end of the Mayan calendar. Well, Groff makes the point that this was really 50 years on either side, this major death rebirth of a 24,000-year cycle that we're in is about a 100-year process. 2012 is the middle of that period. And so it's approximately around the time of the first atomic bombings, and now for another 45 years or so. And that really fits, because in 45 years, we're going to have a pretty good sense that we're either on track or we weren't able to prevent runaway climate change as just one of the pressing disasters that are, looming upon us. So I look forward to sharing that slideshow, and it's very hopeful. The human psyche has a big part to play in the problems that we're facing, and even political structures ultimately derive from psychological structures in the human beings within those systems. And these are things that we can change. We can reduce the amount of aggression inside of us. We can find new ways to feel satisfied without having to consume more and more and more material things. We can discover new capacities to work in a meaningful way and to find work that is satisfying for us, that feels like it's part of the solution. It can open up new avenues for creativity, feelings of unity and oneness with life and with creation. So.
Well put, Ren. That is beautiful. Yeah, sometimes the the human body will get sick as a way of a corrective kind of experience. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, getting a fever or cold or something in such a way that the pace with which we're living our lives gets changed by becoming sick. And so we kind of have to attend, like we have to attend to ourselves. We have to come back to ourselves. I just bring that up because I can't help but see parallels to the state of the world today. That kind of a sickness on a collective level, forcing us to kind of come back and attend to ourselves as individuals and as a collective. So, questions? Anyone? Questions? Comments? Anything stand out for you? Anything seemed to resonate with you? You've had a similar experience? Anything seemed far-fetched? So if we don't have questions in the next few minutes, we're going to begin to wrap up the talk here. So I'll kind of recap a bit, and then again, if you have any questions, just feel free to jump on in, or you may, if your video is off, we won't be able to see you raise your hand. So if you can, turn your video on or turn your speaker on if you have that capability. I don't know, maybe.
Or you can write something in the chat.
Yeah, you can write something in the chat. That would be good. So feel free in the next couple minutes to ask any questions as we're wrapping up here. So again, it's been an honor to spend time with you, to be able to discuss this work. We really honor your calling to hop on the phone and spend time with us out of your life, spend precious time with us. And we're very glad to meet you. We're very glad to kind of talk with you. And we are available. I know I sent, for most people that are on the call, I sent on email, so people have my email, so they can, ask further questions of me. And if there's a question for a specific facilitator, you can also email me and I can forward it to them. But yeah, so basically we're a resource that will continue to be available for you. And I'm also going to be sending out that email that has the interview with Stan Groff. He's kind of the authority, I guess we could say, about non-ordinary states and holotropic breathwork. That fabulous interview, as well as some other resources, the GTT, I think that's stands for Groff Transpersonal Training website, which has lists for resources for you locally for this type of work. I'm also going to be sending the link to the retreat that we as a team are doing in Tulum, Mexico, February 3rd through 10th. There's still spaces available for that. So we'd love to see you and get to actually interact with you in person if you feel called to join us in Mexico in a deep dive into this type of work. So yeah, there's Ari here is signing off. Ari, I'm so glad you're able to join. I know there was some scheduling issues leading into it, and you weren't sure that you were able to join. So I'm so glad you're able to join. It's been really rich spending time with you. Thank you, Ari.
Nice to meet you, Ari.
So if anybody else has a question, we can. I know there's a kind of a chat area, and you can ask a question there too. If your mic's off, you can just ask it. But if your mic is on, you can just ask it. If your mic's off, you can just type your question into the chat. I know there's some chats going on. And I see hello from Derek Ebinger. Hello, Derek. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to write it in the question. Yes, we are actually wrapping up. We're wrapping up the talk. One thing I forgot to mention is the email list for this talk, as well as sending everything that I mentioned, the link to Groff's interview, the books, the link to how to get in touch with holotropic resources you locally, the link to the retreat that we're doing in Mexico. I'm also going to be sending this video out, where we're going to kind of take this video and touch it up a little bit and package it and provide the link to this training so that you can watch it. If you weren't able to be here for the entire call, you can go back and review it. But we are still here for another minute or two, another few minutes. So if anybody wants to ask a question, now's your chance. Ren, your microphone's off.
I like your stained glass window there, Derek.
It looks like a very cool tapestry almost. Okay, so if nobody has any questions, we're going to begin to sign out now. Does anybody from the team have anything to say as we begin to wind down here?
Just thank you, James. It's been fun, and if you all want to stay on and chat a little bit afterwards, I'd be up for that. But thanks very much, and it's really nice to meet people.
Thanks so much to everybody who's joined. Thank you for the team. Thank you for everybody else who felt called to join. It's been a real pleasure.
I just wanted to say thank you as well. Yeah, it's been.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To meet everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's Martha in the chat says thank you all. This has been very helpful. Thank you, Martha. It's great to be connected. Yes. Okay.
Bye, Martha.
So with that, we're going to sign off now. Take care. If you're in Australia, have a beautiful day. If you're in the West Coast, have a beautiful afternoon. If you're on the East Coast, have a beautiful evening. All right. Lots of
What
love.
if you're in the space shuttle? The space station.
And send us a picture.
And also, if anybody has more questions, I'm also available. Email it to me. If anyone from,
So what is your email?
Lotta@LottaLife. I'll put it on here, yeah? I might put it in the chat.
Sure. And I'll also include it when I email everybody.
Oh, if you do that, that's good. Yeah, we'll just do that. Yeah, because people might have some questions that come up later.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's nice with the different accents too, Australian, American.
All right, so Kim says she'll have questions later for sure. Kim, anytime. You can email me, you can email Lotta, you can email any of us. If you email it to me and you want to send it on to anyone in particular, I can forward it on to you too.
I think Derek just said was it too late, but it's not too late, Derek, if you have a question. Otherwise, you can email me as well. Okay. Yeah.
And also,
okay.
it's not too late because I'll be sending out a link to the video, so you can see what you missed. All right, so that concludes our presentation for today. I'm going to stop recording, and thank you again to all you wonderful, brave souls and self-explorers. Okay, recording is stopping now.